Hi, I'm Liron Cohen.
And I'm Mimi Torchin.
And you're listening to Lady Parts TV, the podcast.
Whee!
Hi, everybody.
Greetings and salutations.
You might be hearing some swishy noises. We're having a bit of a storm today. Lots of wind.
Well, we're waiting desperately for the rain.
Yeah, we'll see if it comes. Anyway, we have a special podcast for you. But before we tell you what it's about, we'll tell you the stats of the week as we always do. And this is actually a good week. We tallied 20 shows, out of which 8, which is 40%, episodes were written or co-written by women, and 10, which is 50%, were directed by women.
Amazing.
Thanks to an Australian show we started watching, which we'll tell you about next week. Contributed a lot to this. So this is a special 4th of July podcast. Since we just had 4th of July, we didn't want to not mark it at all. But we thought,
We were feeling so unpatriotic, actually.
Yeah, and we were thinking, what could we do that would be patriotic, that we would feel would be patriotic? And we decided that it was a good idea to recommend to you movies, even though they're not new, most of them, that show the dangers and pitfalls that every democracy faces, but it seems like are very relevant these days more than anything.
Yes.
And how to resist them. How did the people before us resist them?
Resist.
Let's learn from them. So let's start right away with the oldest movie in this bunch. It's called The Wave. It's from 1981. It is available in full on YouTube. It's only 45 minutes. And I remember seeing this movie when I was in elementary school. That's how much it affected me. And the story is about a teacher who teaches his students about the Holocaust, and they don't believe him. They don't believe that something like that could have happened.
That.
Yeah, that you can mobilize a whole people. Some of them normally would be decent,
right.
To do such horrendous things. And so the teacher decides to demonstrate to them how that actually happens by manipulating them as a group to do what he wanted. And it's a fantastic movie. It's a true story. It's based on a true story. Again, it's not long, so if you can spare those 45 minutes, it is on YouTube. Go and watch it. It's so important. It's called The Wave, and 1981.
Selma was in 2014, so I'm sure many of you saw it and will remember it.
Not as many as you would hope, though, because the movie didn't get nearly as much.
No, and poor Ava DuVernay did not get nominated as Best Director, even though the film was nominated for an Oscar. And yes, it was a wonderful film, very stirring, very emotional. Anyway, it's available to rent on Amazon Prime and cheaper to rent on YouTube, by the way. It chronicles Martin Luther King Jr.'s campaign to secure equal voting rights via an epic march that everybody knows about from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. And it shows you a lot of the behind-the-scenes organizing, what happens to the people, the fight with the governor, the National Guard, of course, always being called out on these things. These people just wanted to march across a bridge. And
they treated them like they were being violent.
Yes,
they were not.
It was what we've come to expect from white authoritarianism against Black people in America. This was in 1965, though, and it was at the height of the civil rights movement, and it was very, very important. It stars David Oyelowo, Oprah Winfrey, who was wonderful, as always. I always forget what a fantastic actress she is until I see her.
I wish she would do more acting,
yes,
actually.
Me too. And Lorraine Toussaint, among many, many other people of note. I really recommend it. It's a wonderful film, and will teach you a little bit more, a lot more, about a very, very important moment in civil rights movement in America.
And again, we always need to learn from the previous resistance movements that were successful. We need to learn from them how to resist.
And we're still fighting this war.
Almost everything we're talking about today, we're still fighting
for
in one
black
way or
people
another.
and white people, though not in the same.
No, but we're talking about several minority groups here that are still fighting, and there are more. There are always new minority groups.
Yes,
that,
and by the way, I'm not suggesting that white people have had the same
no, not even
struggle
close.
as black people. I'm just saying that we're struggling now, especially for rights for everybody, which seem to be being snatched away from everybody in this country.
In one way or another.
Yeah, I feel like the kid in The Exorcist with my head spinning.
So Selma, do check it out. This next film is a documentary that I can't recommend more highly. It's called The Corporation from 2003. It is available on YouTube in full. I believe you have to look, just write the Corporation documentary. It was co-directed by Jennifer Abbott. By the way, we'll mention along the way when movies have been directed or written by women. And what's really excellent about this movie is... So this. You probably have heard this notion that corporations are people. The Supreme Court has based several major decisions, such as Citizens United and the Hobby Lobby decision, on this kind of premise that corporations should have rights just as people do. So what this film does is, what it did, it said, okay, if corporations are people, let's evaluate them according to the DSM, and of course they turn out to be psychopathic.
Yes, you know what the DSM is.
Yes, the diagnostic. Well, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is the book that psychiatrists go by to decipher
their Bible,
to follow to determine mental health conditions. What really is important about this movie is I don't think people are aware enough how corporations are actually ruling everybody's lives.
A handful of corporations owns everything, rules everything.
It's
media
seven big corporations. They're all conglomerates.
Yes.
Mega conglomerates. 7 huge companies control the entire world, basically. And we're talking about one corporation can own a media company, can own a car company, can own appliance companies. And so they have very many different interests. And I don't know if you've seen the TV series Incorporated, which we've mentioned in the past.
It was such a great show. I can't believe it was canceled after one season.
But the point is to understand that corporations these days have more money and more reach in the world than governments. And
they don't have to play by the same rules.
And the fact that there are lobbyists, the fact that politicians are allowed to get contributions from whoever and as much as they want to give, means that corporations really are making the laws. And I believe there was... I think it was Eva DuVernay again, her movie 13, that really showed how certain bills in Congress are completely written by corporations. And then because they come with a big donation to the politician, that politician introduces that bill into law. That bill was written completely by a corporation.
The Koch brothers have had so much influence on what has happened in this country.
Yeah.
And they are not the only ones. They're just the ones who are vociferous and who we know about.
And then there's the media. The fact that, like, for example, the Sinclair Group.
The Sinclair Group.
If you haven't heard, Google the Sinclair Group.
It's very, very disturbing.
It is very disturbing. It's, again, a media company owned by a big corporation that is very right-wing leaning, not surprisingly. And they mandate that all those news channels that
they're small stations across the country.
That they air
O&Os.
That they air every time that they air a story about terrorism, even if there wasn't a story about terrorism, for example. They really shape people's minds and people's beliefs.
They forward the right-wing agenda.
So the corporation on YouTube, very, very important that we all watch this.
And disturbing, as is everything about this kind of way of life in our current way of life, in our current government.
Now, another documentary that I highly recommend, and it also is available on YouTube, it's called Outrage. From 2009, and you do have to search for Outrage documentary, because apparently when you search for outrage, a lot of people are outraged. So you might not get the right thing.
I think my picture comes up in Google when you search for outrage.
It also is available to rent on Amazon Prime, and you are going to love this movie because so the premise of this movie is we kind of have this understanding in the gay community that we don't out people, especially not famous people. We don't out people. We never know.
It's not our business,
and we never know what it's going to cost them: their family, their jobs, their livelihood, possibly their lives. So we don't out people. However, what this movie says is if you're a politician and you're making anti-gay laws, you're fair game, and we're going to out you. And so this entire movie is all about outing politicians who, obviously are homophobic. Yes, as if. But as we know, the most homophobic people are suppressed and repressed homosexuals.
The lady doth protest too much.
It is a very satisfying movie. Outrage, again, look for Outrage documentary on YouTube or rent it on Prime. You will enjoy this. It's very satisfying.
Not so satisfying, but very, very moving and well done is The Normal Heart, the play written by Larry Kramer that Ryan Murphy directed in 2014.
It's an HBO film.
It's on HBO Go, right. It's splendid. Mark Ruffalo, Jonathan Groff, Taylor Kitsch, Joe Montello, and Julia Roberts. Practically the only woman. She's a doctor who really helped men with AIDS. In the plague was sweeping the country, especially New York City and San Francisco, and there was nobody doing anything about it. The Reagan administration just wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and claimed nothing was happening, wouldn't put any money towards it. So Larry Kramer, gay activist, attempted to raise HIV and AIDS awareness, and they formed the group ACT UP, which did public protests. I remember, of course, I was there. It was in the middle of my, prime in New York City. I lost many friends. The silence is death was the motto of the time. And this is a very beautiful film. It's both political and human and heartbreaking. Anybody who was around in that time, who lived through it, lost many, many friends, and it was sickening that nothing was being done about it. It wasn't until it started to seep into the non-gay population that something finally started to be done. But as far as the right was concerned and the people in power, it was just what the gays deserved.
Right. It was suitable punishment for the sin, right?
Exactly. The religious right.
They probably even thought of it as
God's.
proof.
Yes, this
Proof
was
that
God's.
It was wrong.
His punishment against a sinful way of life.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a wonderful film. I think it was sort of, to us, Ryan Murphy's first foray into a really serious directing. Yeah. Serious drama, and he did a brilliant job. And as we have seen subsequently, he can do anything.
He can wear any hat.
He can do anything, and he's very aware, and he's a very brilliant man.
And I just want to say a little anecdote. We went to see the revival of The Normal Heart on Broadway, starring Ellen Barkin, who was phenomenal.
Yes, I think she won a Tony, didn't she?
I think so, yes.
I saw the original production, by the way.
Of course you did. You saw the original of everything.
Well, not Our American Cousin, which is the play Lincoln was watching when he was shot. I missed that one. I was sick that night.
Anyway, one of the memories that I will forever treasure is when we came out of that play, Larry Kramer, who is elderly by now.
And was not too healthy.
Not in good health, was standing outside giving out flyers. The man is an activist in every fiber of his being. And
he will be an activist until he draws his last breath.
And I just want you all to understand how important it is in the history of our community. The man is, I worship him, and I just... And
it's also, just to let you know, because I know right now we are in the depths of despair, that activism works.
Absolutely.
It really works, so...
Act up, people.
Act up.
The Normal Heart.
Oh, this is a movie I remember quite well. 1997, it was called Wag the Dog, and never could it be more in vogue and relevant to what's going on. It was co-written, by the way, by Hilary Henkin. It starred Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Anne Heche. who had a very big role, and Woody Harrelson. And it's about about a sex scandal by the president that is being covered up shortly before an election. A spin doctor gets together with a Hollywood producer to join together to fabricate a war to pivot from the president's indiscretion. And as we know, they're not quite fabricating wars, but...
They are fabricating a war. They're completely fabricating a war. I remember it.
No, darling.
Oh, nowadays you mean.
Excuse me.
Oh, nowadays.
Yes.
Oh, just give them time.
Anyway, it was a satire, and it was quite brilliant and quite amazing. You just say, I can't believe that people could get away with this. And they made it believable.
What?
And this White House, every day the president is tweeting and creating a new diversion from the Russia probe. One of these days, I think, hopefully, he will not be able to come up with one. The press won't so readily collaborate with him on the pivot, and he will get what his just deserts. But, the White House talks about fake news. Well, the most fake news that is happening comes out of the White House.
Absolutely. And also just the media
propagated by Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
And also the fact that the media now, because of 24-hour cycle news, and they're all about rating, they're all about selling,
Yep.
they're all about, so they usually, unfortunately, will choose the more sensationalistic story rather than the truth. And
Now,
this is part of why we got this president to begin with, because the media played an important role during the election.
Yes. I still will never forgive Andrea Mitchell, who is supposedly a liberal.
Well, it's like Susan Sarandon, who's supposedly a liberal.
Yeah. Well, anyway, MSNBC to me is a place that you can actually hear both sides of the story, but I have stopped watching it. I cannot bear what's going on in this country. I don't even want to know. A friend of mine had to tell me Scott Pruitt resigned, and he has been practically my most loathed cabinet member.
Oh, there are so many of them. How can you choose?
They're horrible, but...
Anyway, Wag the Dog is again a very important movie to show how the media how the media is
can
being
be manipulated.
Can be manipulated, and how it oftentimes is happy to be manipulated if it serves it. It is available to rent on Amazon Prime, and it's cheaper to rent on YouTube. Wag the Dog.
It's a really good film.
This is a very, very tough movie, but a very important one, I feel. It's called Iron-Jawed Angels from 2004. It is available on YouTube in full.
And if you think you knew anything about the suffragette movement in America, you had no idea what those women went through, and this movie tells you.
Yeah, it was directed by Katja von Garnier and written by a whole bunch of women, starring a fabulous roster of fantastic actresses: Hilary Swank, Angelica Houston, Margot Martindale, Vera Farmiga, Lois Smith, Brooke Smith, Frances O'Connor, even Laura Fraser, by the way, from Lip Service. I don't know. I mean, she must have been very, very young.
And a Brit.
This is it's the story of the suffragettes that were trying to get the vote in the 90s and 20s, and what they went through. And I think, I can't stress this enough, I think the young generation of women in this country do not take so much for granted, and they don't understand the suffering, the lives that were lost in obtaining one of the most basic rights that we have to be part of the decision making in this country.
These women were brutalized. They were locked up. If they had a hunger strike, they tube fed them. They treated them worse than they treat animals, because women dared to want the right to vote.
It's a very important movie. It's not easy to watch. It's
very, very difficult film.
But you know what? It's the truth. These women, if they were able to get through it so that we could have the vote, the least we can do is watch it
and vote.
That's
the least we can do.
Vote for people who support women's rights and everybody's rights, really.
And Hilary Swank is just spectacularly good in this.
Iron-Jawed Angels. Look it up on YouTube.
Now, on the other side of the pond, we had Suffragette, a movie that was woefully underrated, woefully underattended. It was a fantastic movie, 2015, available to rent on Amazon Prime. written by Abby Morgan, who wrote The Iron Lady, and directed by Sarah Gavron, and starring one of my favorite, also I feel rather underrated actresses, Carey Mulligan. It takes place in 1912 London, and it follows mostly Carey Mulligan's character, who sort of reluctantly becomes swept up in the suffragette movement and is willing to suffer violence and to inflict violence in order. She becomes radicalized. She
becomes angry
and radicalized.
She becomes a nasty woman.
You see also that the British women, I'm not sure they suffered quite as the American women did, because, I don't know, were the British more humane? Were they more civilized? But it still is terrible things happen to women in order to try to get the vote. This is in 1912 London. And it's very well done. It's very depressing. It is unrelentingly dark and miserable, but it is fantastically done. And Helena Bonham Carter is also in it. But Carey Mulligan is absolutely transcendent.
I saw a meme the other day that said that feminism is the radical idea that women are people. And both these movies really show it. And I think that even though these movies are not easy to watch, women need to be angry right now. Watch it, get even angrier. Okay?
Oh, God, if I were any angrier, my head would explode.
You're angry enough. I'm talking about some other women.
I just stumbled upon this. Sometimes I'll just sit and I'll be watching one show, and the next show will come up, and I'll say, "Oh, look at this! This was a movie on Stars. It's a 2017 movie written and directed by Nancy Buirski. It's a documentary called The Rape of Recy Taylor, and it's about a black woman in Alabama in 1944 who is abducted and raped by 6 young white men, and her fight for justice. If you think that things are hard now, in 1944, black people were treated as less than human, and black women were there for white men to do with as they would, and it was an ethos passed down from slavery, and we weren't that far away from it. To me, it's again, this is the America that I think Trump wants to make happen again. This is black women were, and by the way, black women this movie shows were always the activists. The first real protest was Rosa Parks, and Rosa Parks became very involved. Rosa Parks in the NAACP, you'll learn a lot about Rosa Parks in this, became involved in this case. And it was ignored largely, of course, by the police. And the NAACP and Rosa Parks got people from all over the country to force the Justice Department and the Alabama justice system to give this woman some justice. So there were 2 indictments. Of course, they were not convicted, these boys, because the jury of their peers was their peers. All white men.
Did you know, by the way, that women were only truly, fully allowed to be jurors in the 70s? Did you know that? That up until then, women were not jurors?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't know that, because it seemed to me that I was always trying to duck jury duty since the first minute I set foot into New York City. There was something very interesting about this movie, which is it used race films. And race films, to make points, race films were popular because black people could see movies about their real lives and their experiences, not just Step and Fetch It and Mammy. And they were films without the intrusion of the white gaze. It was quite fascinating. There's many, many interesting things to learn. It's a difficult film, but it's also a fantastic film. And Recy Taylor outlived, I believe, all of her attackers, many who died in violence. It's a fascinating film. I really recommend it.
I just want to say 2 things about that. When it comes to the race films, I think that goes hand in hand with what we always say. We need representation. You know, we need to make our own movies. Mm-hmm. Women need to make movies. Black people need to make. Everybody needs to be able to tell their own stories, because when our stories are told by the majority, they look very different. And the second thing...
Yeah, I was going to say, even in the 30s and the 40s, black people were making movies.
Yeah.
And we just didn't...
Well,
white people just didn't see them.
Women, by the way, made movies back then, too.
Yes.
It's just that afterwards, when it became such a huge industry, they didn't trust women with all that money. But the second thing I wanted to say was that you may have heard this buzzword recently that is thrown around, which is intersectionality. And it's basically the idea is that, you know, if you're a woman, you belong to one minority group. If you're a black person, you belong to another minority group. However, if you're both, then the intersectionality, the fact that you are more than one minority group, every minority group that is added to your identity, it compounds your the hurdles that you face, the discrimination, and the struggle. So, you know, if women were struggling to get their rights, if black people were struggling to get their rights, black women really faced so much hardship. So,
and actually, the men are facing, it seems to me, more hardship now. But
I
still,
don't want to say more or less. I think everybody's
it's just
facing
always
their
been
own.
very difficult for any women to get justice in these kinds of in rape cases. It was doubly, triply, quadruply hard for black women.
So the rape of Recy Taylor is on Stars. I'm sure it's on demand on Stars. If you can get it, highly recommended. Now, just to wrap this up, I know we're running a little long, but I know that we're talking about all these minority groups, and normally people think of minority groups as people. To me, the hugest minority group that I care about is animals. And if you can watch...
Me too.
And if you can watch the documentary Unlocking the Cage, 2016, it is available on HBO Go. It's also available to rent, I believe, on iTunes and Amazon. The reason there are many movies out there, documentaries about animals, I can't bear to watch anything.
Any of them, the animal rights movies.
It just breaks my heart. It tears me apart, and I can't watch them. But I watched this one, and with the exception of a few tough to watch scenes, it was a very important movie that was bearable to watch. So even if you're like me, this is a movie that you can see. And again, there are a lot of people don't think maybe of, I guess, animals that they eat of as animals that should have rights, though I do. And I think if Facebook has done anything good is to show people that chickens and cows and every animal that you can think of
they
has
have hearts and emotions.
Hearts and feelings. They sense pain. They want to be loved. But, okay, not everybody... That's a step that I know for a lot of people that's a bit far for them right now. But this movie is about this wonderful man, Stephen Wise, who founded the Non-Human Rights Project. And he goes around fighting for specific animals that have been proven to be sentient, that have been proven to understand the concept of time. So, for example, a chimpanzee... If he is in a cage, he's in a cage today, he was in a cage yesterday, he understands that he will be in that cage tomorrow. And that what that means is that we're imprisoning a being, which is basically the harshest punishment that we say for our worst criminals.
An innocent being. And we're torturing them usually.
Exactly. We experiment on them, we use them for entertainment, we use them for food, science, labor, all sorts of things. So to me, really, they are... the biggest, probably, group of oppressed beings.
Oppressed and exploited.
So this man tries to procure personhood, a legal personhood, for certain animals that science has been able to prove that are pretty much as intelligent as humans.
I would say more intelligent than most humans.
And certainly more emotionally intelligent. Anyway, it's a really important movie. If you can go and donate to the Non-Human Rights Project, they're still fighting. They usually have success in the lower courts. Once they appeal to the higher courts, good
luck now.
Yes, of course, they have to always fight, corporations and other big institutions that make money and other things off of animals suffering.
Yes, the right-wing court will certainly protect an embryo, but it won't protect
an actual living being that feels pain and suffering.
And it also doesn't protect the children after they're born.
Exactly. So, Unlocking the Cage, if you can watch this documentary and join the fight, we need more voices.
Didn't something happen good in Israel just recently? Wasn't there a court, you told me?
No, that was India. And
India.
India has given rights to the entire animal kingdom, and you were making this sad joke that if only
they treated their women as well as they're treating the animals, but at least
that.
At least that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We're sorry that we're a little long, but we feel that these are important.
These were important, and I think that you should just check them all out.
Yeah, make yourself
They're
a list.
rewarding, and it's a place to put your anger and to feel commiseration.
Well, but more than anything,
and
I
you
think,
will be enlightened.
More than anything, watch them to learn from them. We do not want to go back to those times. We really don't. I promise you.
We're sliding down the hill right into that pit.
I've read enough books and I've seen enough movies about the Holocaust that I can tell you this is too close to it, and you do not want to go there. Thank you for joining us. Happy 4th of July.
Oh, I hope you had a lovely 4th. Ate lots of hot dogs.
I hope you're feeling super patriotic.
Because everybody I know was as depressed as hell on the 4th of July.
We will see you next week with our regular, usual podcast.
Our cheerful podcast.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.